All right, so this is part two where we start cutting out the leg. So you'll notice, if I zoom out a bit, that I've actually put tape on our leg. So I put two pieces of masking tape at the top and they go straight through the timber. The important part is that the bits I'm cutting are left out of the way of the tape. I probably should have done this a little bit later so I can show you something else, but that's okay. So as you look at your marking, just make sure that it's out of the way of the cuts so that the timber stays together. You don't need to put massive amounts of tape on. The key thing is that the tape is tight so that the pieces do stay together. You'll also notice if I angle down a little bit, this is in a vise, okay? So this piece isn't going to move as I cut it, okay? The first thing I need to do is take my measurements that I made on the last piece and transfer them across. And this is more easily done with a tri-square. Tri-square doesn't fit in with the bit I've put in the vise, so I'll do it on the outside. And so what I do is I get my tri-square, there's my tri-square, and I'll line it up with the mark that I've made with my marking gauge. I make sure that the heel of the tri-square is flush against my timber, and holding that with one hand with pressure into me, I use my pencil to just firm in that mark there, and that makes it a lot easier to see for you guys as well. Then what I do is I make sure my bits are tight at the top, and I take my tri-square on the edge. So I'll just readjust the camera so you can see. If I do that, okay, I can push the tri-square on the edge, and I can see, if I move my camera, that there is a line, and the line is exactly on the edge of that tri-square. There we go. So you can see there the edge is there. So again, I make sure the heel is flush against. I hold it with my hand to make sure that it's not going to come out, and I just draw a line across like so. And then what you should see, as you can see there, the lines exactly match up. Okay, and then lastly, I get my tri-square again on the last side, and you can see there, line up those pieces perfectly. Make sure the heel is against the timber, and I just draw a line like that, and so I can see that those all pieces they line up. I also need to repeat this for the middle line here as well. So just like I did before, I get my tri-square, line it up, make sure the heel is against the timber at the bottom here, get my pencil, draw a line all the way across, get my edge, make sure that I then pull that straight, like so. Tri-square, make sure the heel is against it, draw a line all the way across. And then what I should see is that those lines will match up, and they don't, which means that my timber is not square. All right, if your pieces don't line up like mine, that just means your pieces are out of square. It's not a massive issue, but you can talk to your teacher and they can talk you through some strategies on how to get that perfect for you. All right, so what we can see here is I've put my piece in a vise. You can see the marks that I've made, and you can see this corner here, which is the most important part we're going to look at right now, okay? And we're going to use that to cut. So the tool we use to cut is, we're going to use a tenon saw, and that's what a tenon saw looks like. Okay, you use that saw to cut straight down. What we're going to do is, if I put it side on so you can see, there we go. Just having some issues there. All right. So when we cut, we're going to make sure we're standing in this sort of position. So make sure our saw is straight, and we've got one hand on the job, and the job's not moving. The other hand is on the saw. The other alternative is you can have two hands on the saw, like so. Okay, really, really good. The other important positioning is your feet. Okay, so if we go down and have a look at my feet when I'm going in my sawing position. Firstly, shoes. These are leather shoes, fully enclosed leather shoes. So they are good, even though they look like runners. They are actually leather, and so they are okay to wear in a workshop. But the other important thing is to note the feet as well. So when you cut with a tendon saw, you need to make sure your weight is on your front foot, okay? Actually, no, your weight is on the back foot, and you are leaning into the saw cut, okay? So you can definitely, you've got some stability there, and you can definitely put your weight into the cut, okay? When we go to look at the cut, if I readjust my camera to here, what I want to do, focus, what I want to do, that's the best I'm going to get, I think, is I want to put my saw on the waist side of the line. So I need to adjust my camera on the other side. Apologies. I want to make sure my saw is on the waist side of the line. So when I do this, there we go. Okay, so all this stuff here, I don't want. That's the bit I'm cutting out. So my saw has to be on this side of the line here. All right, if my saw goes on the other side of the line, then it's not going to cut properly. Okay, I'm going to get a cut that's too big. So I want to make sure my saw's there. If I'm not good at sawing, then I need to make sure that I have my saw a little bit away. So I'm going to start cutting probably about 3 mil away, 2 or 3 mil away. And you can see that there's my line, and there's where my saw blade is. Okay, and it looks like it's an angle, which is because my saw's tilting up at the moment. When I put it flat on the thing there, you can see that it's parallel. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start my cut. The way I do that is my thumb. Okay, my thumbnail more so is actually going to be used to guide the saw. I actually don't want to cut my thumb. I'm just going to rest it against it to give it something to hold up to. Okay, and I'm just going to make a few small passes. And what I want to do is I want to get a groove going. Okay, and you can see there that I've got a nice channel for my saw to sit into. Then I'm just going to cut a few times to get that channel happening on the other side as well. And then I can start to cut all the way through. And so on we cut. I'm going to speed through this so that you can see what it looks like at the end. Okay, so what you can see here is two things. The first thing you can see is that I'm really close to the bottom here. And so I need to start slowing down my cut, and I need to start thinking about how they line up on both sides. The other thing you can see is that my cut's not straight. Now it's done deliberately because I rushed it and I wanted to show you guys what you need to do to fix it. So if it's this bad, then you might want to think about cutting it again. Okay, once I've finished the cut on here and gotten rid of this waste piece, I can come back in with a tendon saw, or I might clean that up with a chisel or with a scroll saw or any other number of things to make that flat. If it was thinner, if I was only off by a little bit, or if I was off by 1 or 2 mil at the top, which is what I should have been, then I can come back with a file and clean that up. Okay, but this bit here is going to take me forever to file, so it's probably easier if I come back with another cutting implement, such as I said before, a chisel or a scroll saw, or again the tendon saw again. So getting to the bottom of the cut, we need to make sure is that the cut finishes on both sides. Okay, so both the front and the back. So when you're cutting, you need to make sure that you look in and you see, and you're constantly checking to see that you're not too far and you haven't gone past that line. Just have a look both sides, and so there I'm on the line. At the back, I'm almost on the line. Okay, and so you just want to make sure that your saw is straight when you cut it as well. And so that should be fine there. The last thing I need to do is to finish that cut, put it sideways, and just cut straight down on that line there. So again, same thing as before, line up on the waist side of the line, and make a little chip there. I'm cutting closer to the line this time. And should probably not hit the camera as it is. Again, make my little channel for the saw to sit into. Okay, saw's on a little bit of an angle again, but that's okay. Making sure the saw stays straight, I cut until my waste bits fall. Okay, so as you can see there, this time the cut is a lot straighter. Okay, and I've got my line to mark off, and I've got some work to do, but that's okay. So the other thing you can see here is that the cut here is really rough. So let's assume I'd actually cut this properly, and that was completely straight. I'd still have this rough bit because a saw is quite a rough thing to cut with. So before I move on to the next step, once I've cut both sides out, I need to get a file and file these flat. Okay, filing to the line, not going over the line, but making sure that this is flat to accept our joints when we choose to make them. All right, so the next section we're going to cut is this little bit here. So if I just focus there, right, looking at this little section here. So we've got the lip there for our rails to sit on, and we've got this little line here. So to do this, we're going to use a panel saw, which looks like that. Okay. Now, because this cut will actually go all the way through to the bottom. If I just use the vise normally, then I'd be cutting massively into our table, and that's not a really good thing to do. So what we've done is we've got a bit of scrap material to basically extend the vise out a little bit. I have some material underneath our workpiece that is exactly the same size as our workpiece, so that the supports don't want to collapse underneath, and so it basically spaces them out a little bit. And you can see that these pieces are really close to the cut. I don't want these too far away from the cut because then this is just going to wobble. Okay, and you can see there it's got some movement in it. So I need to make sure to tighten this up a bit more. Okay, so once I've got those supports in, then I just line up the cut like I did with my tenon saw. Okay, make sure it's straight, cut a little bit away from the line, and then just get it started. Now this bit is probably a bit too thin to put my thumbnail in, so I'm just going to support the saw. Actually, no, I can probably just get my thumb in there. Support the saw with my thumb. Start the groove. Okay, and then I can get that groove going again. Once I've got a groove, I can then cut. Now it's important when you're cutting to make sure you use the full blade of the saw, not just doing little cuts like this, but going all the way through. Okay.